Look, I'll introduce our Vulcan and Sherry here, who are our blockchain and trust experts. They, trust is a critical part of this whole project of what we were trying to achieve. And I'll hand it straight over to them to present on that. And take it away.
So I didn't do this, but B. Fletcher, who's going to join in on Charles Morris, who's going to join in on this discussion as well. And so I think what we wanted to do was sort of just have a bit of a discussion and have each of you maybe just talk for a minute or two about your idea around what blockchain is, what it can and what it cannot do. And I might start with Vulcan first, and then we'll go to Charles and Sherry. Just maybe a minute or two. Let's keep it short. I'd really like people to have the opportunity to ask all three of you questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Jana.
No worries.
Yes, so there is a negativity towards blockchain probably in the red meat industry in Australia. And that might be attributed to the lack of knowledge about it, is how it works and how it functions, what we can do with it. First of all, blockchain can provide us a secure, tamper-proof, reliable, and traceable data record. However, when we are dealing with data generated in the physical world, blockchain cannot verify that data. So when we talk about blockchain as a trust generator, it really doesn't apply for those physical applications. So we need to have some kind of trust mechanisms to ensure that the data that we generate can be trusted, and then we can store that in a blockchain so that data cannot be manipulated and it is kept secure, and then it is traceable. Also, blockchain, the first trials and deployments, blockchain was used as a data store. So as a data store, maybe it's not very efficient, especially if we are storing large amounts of data and not using other functionalities. I think we can use it, we can think it as a smartphone. If you have a smartphone and you are only using the call and chat functions, but you can do much more. In blockchain, we can design applications based on the data that we store and automate processes as well. So yeah, I think that the value proposition should be built on those probably additional trust and also those additional functionalities. Thank you.
Thanks, Vulcan. Yeah, Sherry, if you were to share your point of view on this blockchain.
I think Vulcan already discussed most what I plan to say, but I just add one point. I imagine in future, especially in blockchain, in supply chain industry, there a global unified blockchain platform might not be sufficient to deal with different kind of supply chains. I imagine that there might be an ecosystem of many blockchain platforms that are running at the same time. So in that case, the interoperability between different blockchain platforms might be an issue in future. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Charles, you're on the coalface of using such technologies out of the academic world that we see it in. Very keen to hear your thoughts. Your thoughts on about blockchain.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think Vulcan explained very clearly what a blockchain is and what it does. I think the most overused word the last decade has been distrust. It's everybody's got a different perception of what trust really is and what it does for them. I think from our perspective, we'd rather view people have confidence in our system rather than trusting. I think we can comfortably operate without trust, and really that's the point of blockchain. We don't need to trust each other, trust the system that we're using. that gives us confidence to trade. I think for me, the blockchain is more of a data validator, much more so than a data storage system. We don't need to store every single activity, but we need to be able to call on certain points, particularly around smart contracts where we're looking at payments. For us, it's much more around enabling things to happen or validating things that have happened. So my background's in finance, so I'm much more, how can we use a system that gives us confidence that the person purchasing a product is buying the product that they expect to be buying and that the seller is going to get paid. I think that's, we need to put much more emphasis around how can this be used rather than what it is. Most members of the public, whether they're producers or whatever, they don't need to understand the ins and outs of every system that they use. They don't, people accept we don't understand how our mobile phones work, but we know how to use them. And I think blockchain needs to get to that level. People understand that it's there, they got confidence in using it, but they don't need to understand the ins and outs. And I think that's where a lot of people have gone wrong, is trying to explain exactly how it works. It's far too complicated for most people and they don't even need to understand it. They just need to know that it works. And that's where having the confidence in using something gives, that will create the adoption that will make blockchain, forget the word blockchain, it's about the systems. So I think for us, education around what it is, education around what it can do for you, that will lead to the adoption. And then, we can go about our business creating systems for people to use. But until there's user-friendly systems out there for people to use, blockchain really won't go anywhere.
Okay. In my introductory sort of talk there, I made that sort of, provocative claim of saying that blockchain isn't the answer. I guess, and then sort of corrected by sort of saying it is a valuable tool, however. I want to unpack a particular thought around blockchains being great for digital transactions, and you talked about the finance sort of sector and how blockchain really makes sense, and you can have smart contracts and things operating on those sort of digital concepts. But the challenge that I guess we saw was that when physical entities are involved, there is the potential for fraudulent behaviour, injecting bad data or false data into a blockchain, which doesn't solve the issue around trust then. So, yes, you can trust that the data was not tampered, but you can't trust the data actually going into the blockchain in the first place. Yeah. And that's a bit more of a tricky situation with physical objects. And so I guess I wanted to know what your thoughts around, because I think that was a large motivator for us developing sort of the trust engines and stuff, was around this concept of how to get trust about the data going into the blockchain and using blockchain as a tool once it's sort of in there. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done a whole paper on this with QUT. It's a rubbish in, rubbish out scenario. If we've put the wrong information in, the wrong information is going to be carried all the way through, and we're just validating that it's the wrong information. So really, the blockchain is never going to solve that. It's never going to solve crime. It's never going to solve fraud. What it can do is validate data. We've then got to build other systems in to encourage people to do the right thing, to make it beneficial to do the right thing. So you're then looking at a whole load of social and other levels, other things happening that aren't blockchain. I think you're exactly right. Blockchain is a tool to use, but we need a lot of other systems in place to create the right information going in. An example, I think we're working on some multi-signature architecture. So it involves more than just one person submitting the data. So you're actually staking your reputation on the data, and the other people that are validating the data are, basically backing you up, seconding the information that's being put forward. Whether that's as simple as when you're loading a truck, the truck driver validates the right amount of cattle went on, they were the right ones, the numbers matched up to what they were meant to be. I think there's, and that sort of thing's really simple. We've been, in many ways validating each other's comments or data, whether it's on TripAdvisor or, you know, a whole range of things. So we're used to that. And I think we've got to look deeper into behavior rather than just on a blockchain. You know, the blockchain is great, but as you said, it's only part of the problem and part of the solution. We've got to work on a whole range of other things to make, you know, an end-to-end solution.
Great, thank you. Vulcan, I just want to unpack something that Charles said there around validation and trust. So in my mind, there are definite overlaps there. You know, you talked about reputation, for example, you know, and you know, in your implementation, which is coming up later, I guess, you know, we've got, you know, there's reputation building inside of that as a means of also adding and building trust. How would you describe or see the difference between, say, data validation that Charles is talking about that blockchain can be used for versus the trust and trust and reputations that you're trying to generate in your implementation?
Yes, so the data validation also improves the trust because it is like a second observation or second confirmation about something, some event, right? So it is one of the components that can be used to improve the trust for that data piece. So in the presentation I will present, the trust mechanism is built on reputation plus some other collection of evidences or observations that we can incorporate to improve the trust. Yeah, so validation is obviously one of the trust components that we can use, but it's not the only one. And so, for example, using for multiple signature scheme, it is good for like pair-wise transactions. However, like in a farm scenario, for example, it might be hard because that transaction may not be actually happening between agents, right? So then we may need to use other observations, even like different sensor modalities to confirm that, you know, this might have happened because something correlated happened as well. So just improving the trust.
Okay, great. All right. I have a question from Ryan, and I see another one's just come in. This is for any of the panelists. You know, are there places across the supply chain that blockchain is not useful? You know, that you don't think it would be ever applicable to? Or it's just applicable everywhere?
Look, I think from our perspective, we do pull information at every step of the supply chain. So, you know, from producers through abattoir, through transportation, through documentation and regulation. So for us, yes, it is essential all the way through. You know, if we're going to trace end to end, I think there's merits in having all of that information accessible through the same system. So no, I agree that the volumes of data that need storing, that's a different question. We certainly don't approve of that, but I think having access to the end to end of you know, whether it's meat or wine or, you know, whatever the product is, I think there's, yeah, I think it needs to be the whole supply chain. Yeah. Okay,
great, thank you. And then that includes also on farm, like back from the beginning of the thing, or do you see that as not important? You know, it's like, I guess that's the question. You know, do you see blockchain as being important right from the birth of the animal, like on farm, or really just from farm onwards? I believe.
Yeah, I think, you know, we go right back to genetics. So I think, but things like that are, you know, very simple. You know, you're collecting genetic data, storing that. You know, it's not a big deal to capture those data points. So there's no reason not to do it. And without getting really deep and heavy, you know, we then issue independent or unique asset identifications, which can then be carried down through the lineage of, you know, the bloodlines of animals and things like that. So, yeah, look, I think there's merit in doing a lot of data points.
Okay, there's an interesting question here about talking about the from Sean Selvin about the you know, the power that the information has, right, and the value of that information, you know, can be you know, be valuable to different parts of the different supply chain, and it can be an imbalance, I guess, of utilization of that power. So sometimes it might be just a force for punitive punishing on a producer, say, rather than the producer ever getting anything useful back from the supply chain. Now, are there ways that that blockchain can be used to sort of help redistribute, I guess, the value of data and information sharing, such that producers and other entities along the supply chain that have typically missed out on, say, value out of blockchain and their information can be realised? Are you aware of any mechanisms or ideas there for getting more value back to earlier in the supply chain?
Look, for us again, it's really about the money. If a lot of complaints from producers we deal with is they lose sight and feedback of the product as it moves up the supply chain. They either sell to a feedlot, they lose sight at that point, or they sell to an abattoir, they lose sight. Very few people actually have end-to-end vision of their product and then receive feedback from it. I think that's something that that smart contracting and reward mechanisms can do on a blockchain that won't necessarily be able to be done otherwise. They can be done in an anonymous way as well. I think there's a whole range of privacy, and I think guys, you probably touched on some of that a little bit earlier. So I think there's avenues to reward and create feedback loops for people, which they probably don't get in a traditional system.
Okay, yeah. I guess one of the questions I'm thinking is there going to be a mechanism? Are we just relying on the altruism of people further down in the supply chain, to share information back, or do you think blockchain might be a tool to actually enable some sort of smart contract from the get-go to say that if this farmer is putting information on the supply chain through smart contracts or some other means, he guarantees some information back about where this ends up, where his product has ended up, and what value it's achieved?
Yeah, for us, it's very much about that sharing of information, both up the supply chain and back down from the consumer. And you can build, a variety of rewards in there to incentivize people to bother. And I think that's a lot of what's issues between academic outcomes and commercial outcomes. We're always mindful, for producers, they're in business. They're not there to just to participate in activities that we want them to. They're there for their own benefit. And for them, if they see a reason to collect more information, to do things slightly different, to put a bit of effort in, they'll want to be financially rewarded for that. And that may come in learning more about what the end consumer wants, particularly on export. We've done a lot of work in China and Asia, and what the consumer desires there is often different to domestically. And if people haven't got an understanding of that, they can lose sight of what their potential customer might want. There's big learnings to be had by engaging directly with the end consumers.
Yeah, great. Look, we're going to have to wrap it up there. And Vulcan's, I think, already just started on the other stream to present his trust one. So if anyone's interested in continuing on that, jump across to the other stream. And on this stream, I'll leave it over to Dana to introduce and continue on with our.
Sure, thanks. And thanks, Charles, for joining, and Sherry and Phil. It looks like we needed way more than 20 minutes to discuss blockchain, but it's a great teaser.
Yeah.
Thank you.